Okie dokie. Back on the grind. I was gonna do more shit yesterday. I uploaded some covert operations, I think yesterday, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes or something like that. Maybe even less, 17 or something. But I meant to do more, but I got home, played one game of Darkest Dungeon, and instantly passed out on the bed for a while. Asleep in a really, really bad angle because I'm sick right now. Really, like, pretty badly sick. Voice is okay. Throat was sore this morning. My fucking like cheek. I guess I just sat wrong because now it's fine, but my cheek was just hurting so bad. I think it was a combination of one being sick, sinuses and shit being inflamed or whatever, and just sitting improperly. And having to sleep with my mouth open because my nose was just completely shut because of congestion or whatever it is when you're sick that makes it so you can't breathe out of your nose, which is the most annoying part about being sick. I'll take aches and stuff all day. Just let me fucking breathe, dude. Waking up with chapped lips just from one night of mouth breathing. It takes so long for me to go to sleep when I'm mouth breathing. And I wake up so many times. I just basically didn't even sleep. I don't even know if I did, really. It's terrible. Plus, I slept for like an hour or 45 minutes before, so it was even harder to fall asleep, and I was in even shallower sleep, so it was even easier to wake up. Terrible combo, but GG. So I meant to do it yesterday, but now we're good. Okay. New strategy. So the strat is 50-50. 50% new information, hour and a half, just to make it manageable, 3 hours a day. 50%, 50% new stuff, 50% test on everything, hour and a half. So I get enough time to actually do it and maybe go through multiple tests, but go through full examples and boom. And it'll probably be the case where I'm just doing them. And then, yeah, I guess I can just read the outputs because it'll generate those. So generate them with answers, and then I don't have to submit my stuff. I just read it. But ideally, it should have the memory or context the AI should for me to post my answer. That would be ideal. So like, it posts a question, and then I post part of my answer, and then the rest if there isn't enough room. I think that's the ideal because I'd like to paste my stuff, but I guess just reading is probably the best way, maybe. Okay. And I'm doing it by timer, so I have a full like analog timer set up now. Excuse me. My wake up timer, which I never really wake up to except this morning. But I set it hour and a half on, and then I can fuck around for an hour, and then another hour and a half on, and then done. Okay. What am I doing scrolling so far? Cool. So this has all the little bits. Actually, we already had that page open. So we were handling a couple different things last time. We were handling one using a function restricting input to meaningful input. So like we can have a get integer function to get any integer and return it wherever we call it. But we have another function that calls get integer, and this one is called get user ID. And get user ID creates an integer and assigns value to it equal to get int. And only if that value is meaningful, then it returns it. So we don't do this check in the getInt function because then our getInteger function is not a getInteger function. It is a function that gets integers that are relevant in some way, that are meaningful. But I just want a function that gets an integer in general. So I use another function in order to restrict input to be meaningful. And I can do this by having a loop in the getInt function so that we eventually get an integer. And then we have a loop inside the getID function, or getUserID, that loops until the getInt value that's returned is meaningful. So we handle meaningful or meaningless input by restricting it to be meaningful. We only care about meaningful input. We can handle extraneous input. So if you are entering an integer, but the user enters a and then or 5a, they just whatever, just in case, just a test. Or let's see, 5a. Yeah, 5a will work. 5a is good. It could also work if someone's trying to speed run the program, like if it's a text-based RPG, that's the best answer, where the user knows throughout attempts that, hey, the answer to this question is 5, the answer to the next one is A, or whatever. doing a bunch of answers in one output or in one input. So they put an input and then they wait for they use that one input to answer a bunch of questions to finish something quick. Well, in this case, we don't want that. We want the user to be prompted each time for new input and not be able to pre-answer future shit. How we do that is we say, okay, extract what we need and then ignore the rest. Clear the rest of the input buffer. Remove the other characters all the way up until the final character, which is a \n, an n-line character. And we can do this by saying, ignore everything that a stream size, a stream, so ignore the entire size of a stream, the whole maximum size, which we get by including the limits header file. And then we ignore it. So we do standard character input.ignore, and then in those parameters we specify how many characters we ignore, or if we don't hit that number of characters, what character when we hit do we want to stop ignoring? So maybe I want to stop ignoring when I hit Z. So let's say it's like some sort of get letter thing or whatever. It goes and ignores all the way up until Z or something like that. Not a great example. But yeah, so extraneous input. We extract part of it, and then once we have what we need and the variable has been extracted to, and it's good, it's succeeded, so the return value for standard character output, or character input, because it has a return value, a Boolean, apparently. Seems like it's an object, but it's an object that has a return value. Or it's a function that doesn't take an operator, or doesn't use an operator. Like some functions are simply just the parentheses. So maybe, I don't really know how, like, standard character input just has a Boolean return value. And it's whether it succeeded or not for the last the last attempt, the last extraction, anything involving character input, seems like. So we can then handle meaningless value, extraneous values, just extra shit, and failed values. And what we do is we just check, hey, did standard character input fail? If it did, let me check one more thing. There was one more thing where we're checking to peak. Why were we peaking? Oh, so in the extraneous input, actually, we do the peak. So we want to peek into character input to make sure that, hey, there is extra stuff. So we say, okay, extract the value. Then, so we could do, I'll just write it here, sure. We need IOStream because we need standard character input. So we could say it is too hot in here. Okay, so we could have a function that is, let's just say it's getting, well, not getting a string, because the string is the whole line. We use getLine. We'll just say, we'll just say getID. So it's an int, getID. Eventually it returns an integer, but let's just say whatever. It outputs some shit, enter ID. Cool. And then we say there's an int user ID. Value initialized to 0. We extract to it user ID. Cool. And eventually we return user ID. But before that, we check if standard.character input dot peak is not the n-line character. That means that there is more stuff left over in the buffer. So the buffer is empty. And whenever someone puts an input, they put in some sort of character, and then they press enter, or they just press enter. If they just press enter, then the input isn't meaningful. And actually, I think we might fail in this case, which we handle later. In this case, we assume valid input, but then extra shit. So if they enter 5A, 5 gets extracted, so now we have A left over, and then \n, because they pressed enter to submit it, and enter enters a \n character, an n-line character. So if there is more shit in the buffer, aka the next character we see is not this guy, because he's at the very, very end. So like at the bottom of a bag is yellow fabric. If I can't see the yellow fabric, then we're not at the bottom of the bag yet. So we have to ignore the rest of the shit and take it out until we're at the bottom of the bag. And when we are, we're cool. By default, if they entered the right input, we would extract it and there's nothing left. Yellow bottom of the bag, the buffer is empty, good to go. return it. But in this case, if there's extra shit, if there's more stuff, and I don't see the yellow, there's extra stuff, there's fucking blocks and bricks and all kinds of shit in here, what we do is we'll do standard character input, ignore. And then we pass it numeric limits, a standard stream size, the max to ignore everything that a stream size could hold, all the way up until this character, so that we ignore all the rest of it. So that's how we handle extraneous input. We peek to make sure that there's extra shit. We don't just clear extra shit just in case. We check first. Because checking that little boolean should be less intensive than actually having to clear it. And then maybe clearing it isn't proper in some cases. Maybe we don't have an endline character at the end. I don't know. I don't know if that's possible. But that's extraneous input. And then we have failed inputs. And this, as we check in the getInt function, we would check if standard or if not standard character input. And that means standard character input evaluated to false. So normally it evaluates to true. If we're successful, it evaluates to false otherwise. So if not, if it evaluated to false, then we want to reset it. So we do standard character input dot clear, and that will fix it and reset it, because if it fails, it will say, hey, no more shit fits in the bag. So we put a little flag on top to say, hey, no more shit can fit in the bag. We're trying to put more stuff in. It can't fit. Excuse me, because there's a failure flag on the top now. So we can't. So any further attempts, we'll see the flag and we won't even try. It'll just fail and say, no, no, no. Like a fucking bouncer at the front. Some old ass German lady, but jacked. So what we do is we clear it. So we take the flag off, and then we ignore all the rest of the characters. So we say we failed for some reason. Maybe we're trying to fit an integer in here. We want an integer, but instead we put in a character. Well, the character's in the bag now, and we can't push it through. It's unable to go where it needs to go. It's clogging it. So what we need to do is, one, take off the flag so that we can try to do stuff and take characters out of it later, and flush input. We can't flush input if it's clogged with a flag, a failure flag, the not standard character input. Then we ignore the rest, just like with input with extraneous input, where we have extra stuff that we want to clear before doing anything else. In this case, we clear it, we clear it to reset it and get the flag off, and then we ignore the rest of the shit to clear the whole thing out, to remove it all. Then we can try again, and it won't fail straight away unless it's invalid. So if we do an acceptable input, we put an integer in this integer bag, it will now be allowed because there's no failure flag blocking. And there'll be room because it's not clogged down here. There's no other integer, or there's no character that's blocking it. So it's good. The other is EOF characters, so end of file characters. If we're trying to read a file and we've reached the end, we will get an end of file character, it seems like, when we try and read it. Either it's the value that we get when we're trying to read it to signal that it's the end. I think that's the answer. We'll get an end of file one. Well, you can use your keyboard to do end of file in order to terminate the shit. So what we do is we need to make sure that our program terminates whenever someone puts in that kind of character. Well, easy enough. What we do is we say, hey, has input failed? If it has, so EOF characters will fail input extraction. So either we put in something that doesn't fit and can't be extracted and we get a flag, or we get an EOF character as input and we get a flag, same thing. But we also need to terminate the program. And the reason why is because apparently, at least on some OS's, operating systems, putting in an EOF character will actually disconnect the input buffer, or the input stream. Whatever the fuck that means. It seems like the program can no longer interact with the input stream because there's a character in it that said, no, this bitch is totaled, it's over. There's no car shop that can fix this. There's no fucking Bob the Builder here, yo. So what we do is we check, has input extraction failed? Is standard character input false? Is it not? Good? Okay, we have failed. Which means, one, we need to check something now. So we have failed, and then we check something first. So we don't want to clear it and then do stuff and then eventually terminate the program. If we need to terminate the program, we just terminate the program. So the second we see it clear, we're going to say if standard character input dot EOF into file, if this is true, then we need to terminate the program. And we do standard exit, and then we can put in whatever exit character. We put our exit, we put in whatever value we want here. So we could say int main, oops. That's what I need to do to backspace that faster. We need one input and output stream, needs standard character input, and we'll just say and standard character output. And we'll say int get int. Oh, we don't need that. I'm in the habit of doing that now. It's not good. So we say standard character output. Yo, enter an int. Okie dokie, they do that. We say there's int user int. Oops. Need to value initialize it, not call it as a function. It doesn't exist. There's no definition. We do this, and then we extract it. So we do standard character input to user int. So we extract it, and then eventually we're going to return user int. But before that, we're going to do is if not. Ooh, I think actually I can do that. So we can say not, and then parentheses, and I don't have to go outside of the parentheses and then go back in. I can just go not, parentheses. If not standard character input, we have failed. So right here, this means input extraction failed. Then we need a couple things here. So we need block scope, because if statements only have implicitly one line of scope that follows them. So if we put one line of code here, and then we put another line of code here, this one will be included in the if statement, but the next one will not. So whatever comes after, even if we indent it to make it look like it's under, it will execute all the time. So if not standard character input, it means it failed, which means we're going to check to make sure, do we need to end the file? If not, then we can just clear, ignore, we're good to go. But if we aren't, so if we have standard character input.eof, this is end of file. EOF character entered, need to kill the program, which means we don't need a nested thing here. We only need one line. We're just going to do standard exit, and I'm just going to have a global variable here. So we'll say const, actually we could say const expression because it's known at compile time. Const expression, EOF char value, char, this needs to be an int. We need a data type, duh. Const expression is just a qualifier. Int, EOF error value, something like that. And we could say that it is 7. Let's say it's 7. Okay. And we just do EOF error value. We could have it within a namespace. So we could just say, this could be in another file too. And then we could include it. Namespace, error values. And then we can just include this whole thing here. And then we could say error values, EOF value. Cool. And that allows us to kill the program. We don't need to. We could just say kill the program. And then we could say, okay, if we didn't get an EOF character, all we need to do is clear it. So we say standard character input dot clear to remove the failure flag. And then afterwards, standard character dot ignore. And then we need to pass it the stuff that we need to ignore and clear all the extraneous characters. Remove failure flag, clear input buffer for next input attempt. Okay. So we also need to include limits, and we need numeric namespace numeric limits, I think, or oh sorry, it's not namespace numeric limits, it needs standard numeric limits because it's within the standard namespace. So now we're going to pass it, so we're standard ignore, or standard character input ignore, we're ignoring all the way up until we get an inline character, but how much are we ignoring? It's the whole input buffer, so we need to get the limit of the input buffer, which is by standard numeric limits, we can get the total amount of shit that things store. So we can get the maximum and all kinds of things. What are we trying to get the maximum of? What's the type that we're trying to get the maximum value of that it can hold? It's a stream in this case. And I guess the value for that is called stream size. It's the value for numeric limits that holds how much shit can fit in a stream. So we say standard stream size. And then we can use a scope resolution operator here to go inside numeric limits, which maybe is another namespace. Maybe it's an object. I don't really know what numeric limits is. I just know that it's inside the standard namespace. I would guess that maybe it's a, I don't think that it's a, I don't think it's an object because we're not using a member function. We're using a function that's inside a namespace. It seems like numeric limits, and then there's some sort of template shit that I'm ignorant about, and then we can use the max function that's inside it. So we can use max. And so this will clear the entire input buffer. How many characters? The whole thing, the maximum. And I actually want this to be in parentheses, so I know that everything is operator precedence is happening properly. This whole thing is how many characters, not standard numeric limits something, and then max comma something or whatever. I just need to make sure that everything's cool here. So we remove the failure flag. We could do this too. How less readable is this? So say input extraction failed. If the EOF character entered, killed the program. Or we just say if. Remove the failure flag. And this will really return, this will just kill the program. Okay. How about, what if we did this? I think this is fine. Kill the program. Otherwise, we're just, well, it doesn't even need to be, it could be an else, so it should be if this, else this. But in this case, it's just easier and more concise. We don't need another line. We just say, hey, if this happens, kill the thing. If it didn't happen, we don't have an end of file character, then it's cool. So this is just one check, and then we end the program here. We don't need an else in this case, it's fine. And then we clear the rest of the input buffer. Excuse me. And then in this case, we can have this guy be inside a while true loop. And we do this, and then at the end we return userInt. Like that. So we say, hey, every single time, we're gonna do this forever until you finally return something, motherfucker. You can't skip this. No, sir. You gotta enter shit, extract it. If we failed, either clear the flag and ignore, and then input again because you put in the wrong data type, or we kill the whole program. Odds are it'll probably be this. And that's if we fail. But if we do 5 and then A, we're not going to be getting it here. So we could say in the same one here, we could detect, so if we failed, we do this. And if we failed at the end of this, I don't want to ignore it twice though. If we failed once, oh, we could just have it here. We do it here. No, because then if it failed, it would do it again. If it failed, in this case, we already did this, so we may as well just continue. Continue to the next loop. We don't need to ignore again. Here is to handle extraneous input. So this is handle input failure. And then this is handle extraneous input. And this is just standard character input dot ignore. And we could do the same thing here. Or we could just have another function and we just call it void ignore line. Actually, it's just one line. Boom. That's it. And then we could just say, oops, again, ignore line. Boom. And then here, we could just say ignore line. Cool. Oh, and we only want to do this actually. So in this case, we know that it has failed. So we know that there's some extra shit in the buffer. So we know we need to ignore it. In this case, we don't. Actually, can I do like that? Damn. All right, whatever. Stuff's kind of funky. I could click on it to kind of fix it, maybe. All right, whatever. In this case, we only want to ignore the line if we have extra shit. So in this case, we'll do if standard character input dot peak is not the inline character. Then we ignore the line. So in this case, we handle input failure by saying, hey, if we failed, either kill the program if we have EOF characters that are supposed to be terminating the program. Otherwise, well, it's not even otherwise, but if we did that, we do that. If it didn't happen, then we just clear the flag, ignore the rest of the shit, and then continue on. We don't need to go down here and ignore again. We know that there's, actually, we don't necessarily have to continue, but then this running is redundant, so we may as well just continue at this point. If we didn't fail and we extracted properly, we just have extra shit here, then we can just ignore the line and then go on. So in this case, we could have int x, or we just call it int character level, and then we just say get int, like that. And then we could say standard character output, character level is character level. Cool. Okie doker. So now, in this case, we can say, oh, and actually, I want some debug things, just so we can see. So we could say, if we did this, we're going to do standard character output, extraction failed. Okay. Here, we could technically also say standard character output, EOF char detected, terminating program. Oops. Cool. And then here, we could say, whatever, extraction flag, that's fine. And then it prompts again. But then here, it's good. So we say, if this, we could also do, okay, that was bad. Let me do this again. Standard character output, and we'll say, let me do it again for muscle memory. Character out, oops, again, holy shit. Extraneous input, or cleared extraneous input. Okay. Boom. So, yo, intern int 5A. We got extraneous input, but we extracted properly. Cool. A5. Extraction failed. A5. All these are failing because I'm entering all these characters. And then again, if we do some huge number, F, then we get, oh, well, it was correct, but it said cleared extraneous input. If we do a number that is too big, actually, oh, we can actually do control backspace. Noted. Oops. Huge number, it'll actually fail because of overflow. So we handle, that's technically a case that's in the failure case. I mean, technically it's a different thing, but it is handled the same way. If overflow, then standard character input will fail anyways, because it will realize, yo, this value is a lot. I guess there's something that triggers whenever we overflow, or there's another variable that I guess is able to evaluate a number more than the variable itself that doesn't know that it's being overflowed. And it says, yo, this number is too big. It does not fit in what you're trying to fit, therefore, failed extraction, which is nice. Oh, the nose is so annoying. Okay. Okie dokerson. Cool. So we failed, and then boom, 5 is cool. Okie doke. So we're handling that. We could also handle meaningless input. So we could say if levels are only from 1 to 20, I could have another function here, and it's just called get player level, and then all it does is has an integer, and then it says, hey, get integer. And this could actually be, no, couldn't, never mind. I was going to say this could be const, but it's not because it has to be overwritten. We could say, actually, we could have a const value in the get character level by saying, hey, while true, okie doke, const int player level is initialized to be the value of getInt. If the value is out of range, continue, and it will loop again, getInt will happen again, and it will get it again. And we check by doing if out of range by saying either if it's greater than or less than something, or if the levels are, I don't know. I mean, yeah. In that case, you probably want to use an if. We just say, hey, if it's out of this range, if it's greater than this or less than this, yo, ain't no way. And then we say continue. And then eventually we get the proper value and we return it. Cool. Okie doker. Yep. Yep. So we put it back in normal operation. So we clear. Yeah. Cool. Okie doke. Yeah, we can test if there's unextracted input. Well, Not this EOF shit. Unextracted input would be whether there's an end of file character. And then peek is actually doing the hard work here. But peek should return true or should return not this if it's an end of file character anyways. So already that should be the case. And if character input failed, we don't need to check this shit anyways. We may as well just check it separately because we only need to peek when we're clearing extraneous shit. When it's end of file, we just want to kill the program. So we don't want true because then we have to further evaluate this and say, which one was it? Was it EOF or was it peek? Because if we get unextracted input, we don't want to just clear something or ignore something after. We don't know if we need to kill the file. And if that's the case, then we don't want to do peek. We just want to kill the whole kill the program, not the file. Sorry. Then use this. Okay, cool. Yeah, I can exit. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, and then booleans for all this. Oh, hell nah. I'd rather do void. Void's cooler. And we could have it be boolean, but then we just leave it as an expression statement. So we call the function and then don't do anything. It's too cold. We don't do anything with the return value. And if we don't, then we can just call it as is as an expression statement. But if we want to output it, all we do is we say, hey, put a little standard character output before that thing, little bool alpha, and then say, yo, did detect whatever the hell. And then, boom, it's there. I guess it could make sense, because you would want to do... You could have a unit test and have a function to test the values. And it would call the has unextracted input after calling another function to get input in there. And it would test it with, like, let's say 5, and then it doesn't see it, and then it returns false, so you know that it's returning properly. So it could make sense to give it a return value and then just not do anything with it. But I wonder how that works. Like, if we get a return value, but we don't assign it anywhere, assignment... Not variable creation, but assignment is the expensive part. Apparently just creating variables doesn't do anything. Because it's basically just saying, yo, that's the room that I want, that's the house I want to move into. I didn't do anything, I didn't go in there, I didn't clear anything out, I didn't have to go in and like search through. I just pointed at the house, that's easy. I just say, yo, over there, that's it. But it's the assignment that is hard. So if that's the case, then it should be fine if it just discards the return value that we're not using. So we just call it, it returns a bool, who gives a fuck? Who cares if it's not used? That's fine. And now we have assert. So now we could do like assert something needs to be true, or assert this as true, or assert this as false. So this or not this. And then how did we had it in a file that it gave us earlier. This or not this, and then we had to make stuff pass. So it was like assert this, and then I think it errored out. It did like standard. I guess it did standard exit, or maybe it was standard. It was not standard halt. I guess it was standard exit, or maybe it was some sort of other exiting type. Maybe. And it was a debug error, and it was a big dialog box. And it said, whatever, halt, blah, 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 line, something, and then the code, I think. I'm trying to think of the syntax there. So it's assert this, and then we run something, and then is it just the second, like we do an assert, that value is being watched, and the second it evaluates to the wrong thing that it happens? Or do we like have to assert something, and then we have scope within it, so that the assert is only true in that scope? That might also be the case. Oh, getting tired. Okay, in a function that takes parameters, we can pass in arguments that are valid, but semantically meaningless. Okay. Yep. So if we're not dividing by 0, return the division in double format and floating point values. Otherwise, we'll do an error. And then it will cause the program to crash. I feel like I need a brain break real quick. Yeah. No, fuck it. Alright, let's continue. The reading just got like harder. Alright. And the problem here is that we didn't check first. We let the error itself crash the program. Instead of first checking immediately and then erroring properly and handling it instead of just letting the error happen. Like, detected invalid graphics settings, closing program, or whatever. Your computer cannot do this. Instead of letting you max your graphics settings and then the program just crashes. There should be ways to get around it. So maybe you pass it a boolean, and the boolean is whether the assert happens, so that you can test the computer to see, can it actually bypass this? Is this assert correct? Is it actually needed? Does it need updating to make sure that you can actually run higher graphic settings than you thought? Okay. Oh yeah, there were other ways of exiting the program too, I think. Oh yeah. Yeah, we get an issue and something doesn't appear. We don't know what happened. And if we print an error message, yeah, other shit could hide it. So we need something to say, yo, this is a big error. Don't overlook it. All right, I'm gonna take a break for a sec, and then I'll just upload this and then start again.